Masechet Megillah Daf 27A1. We are 3 lines down. Darash bar kapara. So bar kapara comes and he expounds. My dichtiv, what does it mean in the pasuk when we're talking about that when Nebuzaradan, he was a Sartzava of Babel, he was a general of Babylonia. When he came into Jerusalem, what does it mean in the pasuk? Vayisrof et bet Hashem, that he burnt the house of Hashem, et bet Hamelech ve'kol bet Yerushalayim, in the house of the king, and all the houses of Jerusalem, ve'kol bet, right? Ve'kol bet gadol saravesh, and every big house he burnt in the fire. So bet Hashem is the Bet HaMikdash. Bet HaMelech, those are the armonot shelmen, the paltrim, which are the palaces of the king. Ve'kol batei Yerushalayim, all the cities of Yerushalayim, Mashmalan, as it's written. Ve'kol bet gadol saravesh, and all the big houses. One of them says makom shemegadlim bo Torah. One of them says a house which they are. What does it mean? Vet gadol, bait shemegadlim bo. The bait shemegadlim bo means that they grow in it for Torah, which means the Bet HaMidrash. And one of them says v'chadamar makom shemegadlim bo tefillah, which is the Bet HaKnesset. So basically, he destroyed the Bet Hashem and the Bet HaMikdash, the houses of the king, right, which is the palaces, the big houses. That's kipshuto, and then the big houses means either megalim bo Torah or megalim bo tefillah, which means either a Bet HaMikdash or a Bet HaKnesset. Mandam, according to the mandam that says Torah, tichtiv Hashem chafetz eman tzidko, yagdil Torah, v'yadil lehagdil Torah, lehagdil Torah. So Beit Gadol means a place where the megalim bo Torah. Umandam, and according to mandam tefillah, tichtiv saperana et kol hagedolot asher atza Elisha, to go over and to tell over all the gedolot, all the big things that Elisha did. Elisha dava berachmeo dvid. How did Elisha do it? Elisha did it with prayer. So since he did it with prayer, so therefore it means Davar Gadol is through tefillah. So when it says Megalimbo, it means through tefillah. Tistayem, we want to bring a proof that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is the one that says Makol Shegalimbo Torah. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, but the Knesset doesn't Bet HaMikdash. Because according to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, he just said at the top of the page that we finished last night, he just said, Damar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, a Bet Knesset, you're allowed to make it to a Bet HaMikdash. Why? Because a Bet HaMikdash is a higher level. So if the Bet HaMikdash is a higher level, so therefore obviously Makom Shmagalim Torah, that is Shita of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Which one? No, according to Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, no, because the Bet HaMikdash is a higher level than Bet HaKnesset. Okay, fine. Next, we write the 2 dots. So the 2 dots says Machru Sefer Torah Lo Yichu Sfarim. If you sell a Sefer Torah, you're not allowed to buy Sefarim. What is Sefarim? Tanakh. You're not allowed to buy. So says the Gemara by Lehu. We're going to ask the following question. Sefer Torah Yashan, likach bo chadash. We just said you're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah and purchase Nevim Uktuvim. Can I sell an old Sefer Torah to buy a new one or not? That's the Gemara's asking. So says the Gemara, since at the end of the day, you're not changing the Kiddusha, right? You're not going up, so maybe it's a sur. Or DMR maybe, there's no way of going up. So Shapidam it's mutar, which means like this. We just said in our Mishnah that you're not allowed to go down. So what does it mean you're not allowed to go down? You can never go down in Kiddusha. So if you sell something, you always have to go up in Kiddusha and continue going up and up, but you cannot go down. So the question is, when you sell an old Sefer Torah for a new one, since you're not going up, it's prohibited, or there's nowhere of going up. Because after Sefer Torah, there's nothing. Sefer Torah is the highest Kiddusha that we have. So since we have the Sefer Torah, which is the highest Kiddusha that we have, so therefore it should be permitted. So that's what we're trying to now analyze. Is it permitted or prohibited? So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. The fact that it says if you're going to sell a Sefer Torah, you cannot buy Sefarim, which means Nevi'im Uktuvim, Nach, Sefarim Udelam. You cannot come and buy Sefarim. Bab Torah beTorah, Shapidami. So we want to deduce from the same Mishnah that you cannot buy Sefarim, but you are allowed to buy another Sefer Torah. So says the Gemara, no, that's not why. Maybe our Mishnah is only b'diavad, meaning if you already sold a Sefer Torah, so you could buy another Sefer Torah, but you cannot buy Sefarim. When is our question? Right? When is this question? This question is, he says over here, lechatchila. Lechatchila, can I sell, right, Sefer Torah, right, in order to come and buy another Sefer Torah? So Tashema, we're going to try to bring a proof. Golin Sefer Torah b'mitpachot Chumashin. You know, you could wrap around, right, the Sefer Torah with a mipachat of the Chumash. That means a book that only has one Chumash, right? Let's say you have a book that only has, let's say, Bereshit. So now what happens is that you have an entire Sefer, okay? So now what happens is you're allowed to come and you're allowed to take the Chumash, you're allowed to take that wrapping that they wrapped around it, and you could use it on a Sefer Torah. Chumashim, you could wrap it around with mitpachot of nevim uktuvim. Why? Again, because you're going up in kedusha. Aval lo nevim uktuvim and mitpachot chumashim. You cannot do nevim uktuvim with mitpachot of chumashim, which means because you're going down. Or the chumashim mitpachot shel Sefer Torah. Ktani nihat. We did learn though. Kolim Sefer Torah mitpachot shel chumashim. Mitpachot chumashim, yes. Mitpachot Sefer Torah, no. So it's mashma that you cannot do it with the same kedusha of Sefer Torah. It's only with something else, but not the same one. So ima seifa. Let's see then the seifa, right? Which is the latter part. The latter part over there said, you cannot come and go around, right, to the chumash. You cannot wrap around the chumash with the mitpachot of Sefer Torah. But Torah v'Torah, shap yedami. So basically, since from that braita, right, we have a contradictory inference, which means I can infer from one part of the braita, it's prohibited. Another part of the braita, that it's permitted. So whenever you have that, I cannot bring a proof from it. So therefore, it says the Gemara, I cannot bring a proof. So therefore, we still have the original question. Okay? Now we're going to try to bring another proof. Tashema, remember, Tashema, we're always trying to say, literally means come and learn, or come and listen. But the concept is, come and listen, let's try to see if you could see an answer from this. So Tashema, Manichin Sefer Torah al Gabe Torah, you're allowed to place a Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah. Torah al Gabe Chumashim, you're allowed to put a Torah on top of Chumash. The Chumashim al Nach. Okay? Aval lo nevim uktuvim al Gabe Chumashim. We're not Nach on the Chumashim, and not Chumashim Gabe Sefer Torah. Which means like this. Nowadays, some people say that it might be different because everything's printed. So if it's printed, it might be a little bit different, but usually lechatchila we still try to be machmir, which means like this. I have a chumash, the chumash is always on top. Some people, they make a mistake and they take their glasses and they put it on top of a gemara. Your glasses is not a gemara, which means don't put your glasses on a gemara, right? They don't have kidusha, right? Even if you're going to come and you're going to mix your coffee with it, so you make a basar v'chalav, right, or whatever it is, but there's no kidusha in glasses. So you don't take glasses and you put it on top of a sefer, right? Or you don't take glass, you understand? Meaning that, right, you have to be very careful, right? So, we're trying, no, because you're using the sargel, you're using it to come and to underline, that's something else. But some people, they come and, you know, they have their chumashim, or they have the sidurim, and they start doing like this. Or they start putting their phone, or they start, you understand? It has no kiddusha, meaning that you're not supposed to do that. Now, even within sefarim in themselves, there's kiddusha, which means I cannot put a sidur on top of a chumash. Why? The chumash has a higher level of kiddusha than a sidur. The sidur doesn't check in a segdolah. You understand? Mishnayot, you cannot put mishnayot on top of a chumash. Right? So that's what we're saying here. We're saying the Torah is the highest, right? Which is the chumash. After that comes the nevim and the ktuvim. And after that will come other things. So says the Gemara, right? What are you trying to bring me a proof? But mashma from there, right? That you cannot put you could put a Sefer Torah on top of another Sefer Torah. And you could put a Torah on top of Chumashin. Chumashin you could put a Nevi'im and Ktuvim, but you cannot put a Nevi'im and Ktuvim on top of Chumash, right? And not a Chumash on top of Sefer Torah. So says the Gemara, Hanacha ka'amarta. Are you talking about Hanacha? Shanei Hanacha de lo efshar. It's different from placing of a Sefer Torah because you cannot put it one on top of another, which means there's no place in Aron HaKodesh to put every single Sefer separately, so therefore you're allowed to put it one on top of another. But here we're talking about in a general case, right? Can you come and you start, whether it's going to be buying a Sefer Torah for another Sefer Torah and so on and so forth. Dilo temahachim, if you're not going to say that, how do you do the golel Sefer Torah? You have one daf is on top of another daf, right? So obviously it's permitted. Which means this. Even in the Torah in itself, you have one daf on top of the other daf, because when you're rolling it, you have one on top of another going on. So imagine you had the entire Tanakh together. So it means you're going to have some on top of another one, but there it's efshar, it's efshar. You can't do any other way. So therefore it's going to be permitted. Okay, so Tashema, we're going to try to bring another proof. Here it's written in Furash that a person should not sell a Sefer Torah Yashan in order to purchase a Sefer Torah Chadash. So you see from here, it's Mefurash and a Braita. Mefurash, you're not supposed to sell an old one in order to buy a new one. Says the Gemara, no. Hata mishum pshiyuta. There, it's because of pshiyuta. What does it mean pshiyuta? What happens is that sometimes you sell it, and then you don't buy the new one. Just like we spoke about the Beit Knesset. You cannot destroy the Beit Knesset until you build a new one. Because if you build a new one, then that's it. But if you don't, that could be a problem. So he says, Kigon, for example, Dichtiv umanach. So ki kamrinan kigon dichtiv umanach li paruke. My. What happens if it's already written and you have the money to buy it, and therefore there's no suspicion? That's the question. Which means that what we're trying to say now is that we're trying to say that what's going to happen in a case where you already have it written, you have the money, and you have everything. So the question is, can I sell the old one in order to buy this new one? Okay? That means, and then, so what's the suspicion? So again, so Tashima, we're going to try to bring another proof. It says of Yochanan, it says over here, the only way to sell a Sefer Torah is to learn Torah and to get married. Those are the two reasons. There is another reason brought down in the Gemara, but here the Gemara says to sell. So when can you sell a Sefer Torah? Only to learn Torah or to get married. So it says the Gemara, Shema Mina, we learn from here, Torah beTorah shapir dam. So you learn from here, why are you allowed to sell a Sefer Torah? Because you're learning Sefer Torah. So if you're learning Torah, so that's like a substitution. It's a substitution of Torah with Torah. You're not allowed to sell Torah unless you're going to learn Torah. So if you're learning the Torah, it's a substitution for Torah with Torah. So you're allowed to. Says the Gemara, Dil Mashan Limud. No, it's not true. Maybe Limud Torah is stronger than selling a Sefer Torah. Why? He says, Shalimud Mevil de Maaseh. Learning brings you to action. Our purpose is to act, not to learn. The learning is a medium to the ends. The ends is to change. The ends is to do the actions. Lo midrash wa ikar ela maaseh. What does that mean? The maaseh is the ikar, not the midrash. The midrash is all nice and dandy, but it's the ikar is the maaseh. Okay, so he comes and he says maybe isha limud shalimud mevilid maaseh isha nami, and also a woman also. Why? Lo tohu v'ra l'shevet yitzhak. Kadosh Baruch Hu did not create the world in order to be desolate. He wanted that the world would be full, right? Would be to procreate. That's why this is called the mitzvah of shevet, which means every single Jew has a mitzvah of piyah v'rivya, which means to procreate, but that's only a boy and a girl, right? Or two boys, whatever it is. I'm saying according to Bet Shammai, but we paskin halacha l'maseh boy and a girl. Once you fulfill a boy and a girl, you fulfill the mitzvah piyah v'rivya. But now what mitzvah do you have? La shevet. Right? What is Lashevet? Lashevet is Loto Ubera, Lashevet Yitzara. Okay? Al Torah beTorah, lo, but to do one Torah with another Torah, right? It's not going to be a sur. Okay? So Tanu Rabbanan, we're going to try to bring another proof then. It says, a person should not sell a Sefer Torah, even though he doesn't need it. Yeter al ken, more than that. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, afilu elo mayochal, even if he doesn't have what to eat, umachar sefer Torah, and he sells the sefer Torah, obito, or his daughter for an amayvriya, eno roe siman beracha leolam. He does not see a siman beracha forever. What does that mean? That means basically a person should not sell a sefer Torah even though he doesn't have, right, another sefer Torah. Okay, so that means a person should not sell it. Okay, that means he doesn't need it. Doesn't matter. Don't sell it. More than that, even if he doesn't have what to eat and he sells a sefer Torah or his daughter, he never sees a siman bracha. So you see from here, right, that it's talking about that if a person has what to eat, you're not allowed to sell it. But the same is talking about a person that does not have what to eat, so therefore it's going to be mutar limkor. But he doesn't see a siman bracha. Okay, he doesn't see bracha in it. Okay, nekuda, 2 dots. Also with the extra money. So we just mentioned that also with the extra money, you cannot bring it down in value. Okay? So Amar Rava comes and he says, okay, Lo Shanu, what are we dealing with? Right? Ela shemachru ve'otiru. We're talking about that you sold it and you have leftovers. Aval gavu ve'otiru. But if they were collecting money and they had leftovers, mutar, which means like this. If I come and I take a Sefer Torah and I sell it, now, with that money, I went and I used it for another Sefer Torah. Or I sold a bima and I bought a teva. And, I kept on going upwards. Right? So I kept on going upwards. That's okay. If there's leftover money, that leftover money has the same kiddusha as the previous money. But let's say we're collecting money. We're collecting money for a Sefer Torah. And now we thought it was going to cost 50,000, right? Or 55,000, whatever it is. And now we have 2,000 extra. It costs us 53. So that extra money you could do with whatever you want with it. Aval gavu is going to be mutar. Why? Because since, right, they still didn't use the money for that kiddusha, you're still allowed to use that money. So Abaya comes and he's going to ask the following question. One of these words, shelo hitnu, when they didn't make any condition. Aval hitnu, but if they made a condition, afilu, right, leduch sasya, it's going to be mutar. Even for duch sasya, it's going to be permitted. So, right, we're going to ask, what is duch sasya? Wait 1 minute, yeah? So the Gemara says, hey, chidami, what's the case? If you're going to tell me that they sold and they had leftover, what do I care if you made a condition? Right? We already said that it has the same kiddusha. Obviously, we're talking about that they collected money and those leftover. Ta'ama ditznu, only because they made a condition. Halo itznu, but if they didn't make a condition, you're not allowed to. So says the Gemara, no. Leolam, really, they sold it and it was left over. Right? This is what it means to say. But one of these words, when there was no condition of Shivatu V'ayir with the people of the city. Remember, there's always going to be the board members of the city. Those are called Shivatu V'ayir. We said last night that there's going to be it's not going to be equal in order that you always have an odd number, in order that you always don't have an equal vote. Okay, so you have 7 people. So it says over here, Shivatu V'ayir, and it has to be B'ma'amad and She'ayir, with everybody there as well. And it's not just enough that the members of the city, the board members, they come and they sell something. It has to be with everybody there. But if they made a condition in front of the presence of everybody, so then what's going to happen? So then even if it's going to be for duchsusya, it's going to be mutar. Okay? We're going to explain. The Gemara is going to explain. Okay? So says the Gemara, Abaye comes and he says, Rabbanan, that he was being misader the brightot and the mishnayot in front of Rav Sheshat. What's duchsusya? Did you ever hear? Did he ever explain what is duchsusya? Amalei, he says, this is what Rav Sheshat says, parasha de mata, the perish of the ear, which means the parasha. This is what talking about. He says here, they used to come and they used to get a horse rider that he was always. That means basically he used to always be, ready as a messenger. Okay, whenever they need something.
A rider. A rider.
A rider. He was a messenger. Okay, but he was riding on a horse, right? That's what it means. Okay, that's why it says duch susya, right? The sus is the horse, and doch susya, right? Which is basically the rider of the horse rider in order to come and in order to do different things that they need. Amar Abaye says, Hilkach, therefore, let's say you're a Talmid Chacham and you need to know an explanation of something and you don't know. So always go in front of the people that were in front of the rabbis and they know. For sure they heard it from somebody. Which means this is called Gadol Shimusha, which means many times you could have what's called Shimush. Shimush means that you are by the rabbis all the time, and therefore many times you learn from them certain things that other times you don't have. Okay, so that's very, very important. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Yochanan, name Rabbi Meir, Bnei Ha'ir shalchu le'ir acheret upasko lehen tzedakah notnim. Do you know when you have people of the city and they went to another city and there they were kabayet tzedakah, right? That means basically like this. Just like there's, the federal taxes and the taxes of this and that, there's also taxes of the city. What does that mean? In the olden days, the way that they used to do it was, you live in the city. Okay, you have to give this amount of money to tzedakah. You live in the city, you have to give this amount of money to tzedakah. You continue going. Well, are known as property tax. It's not property tax. It's tzedakah that's going to the aniyim. It's tzedakah going to the aniyim. So now what happens is, though, they only obligate the people that live in the city. Meaning, I cannot come to a tourist and tell him, listen, you have to pay this tax. Why? Because it's for the poor people of the city. So therefore, I'm not going to obligate them. Certain things you can. For example, right? A tourist that comes, I cannot obligate him to pay for their roof. But somebody that lives in the city, I could obligate them to pay for their roof. Why? You live in the city, you benefit from their roof. If you want to use their roof, you have to pay. There's a membership. What's a membership? $100 a year. Here it is. You have to pay. You could force them to pay. And if they do not pay, so then they're not allowed to carry. That was the psak. מי זה הוא שם? זה בשביל כולם. בסדר? אבל אז אסור לך ולכל משפחתך לצאת. אסור לך לא לצאת, הוא יכול לצאת, אבל בלי שום דבר. You cannot carry anything. Because you can only use the roof, right, if you're a part of the group. Yeah, by the way, you should know that was a psak of Rabbi Weberman here as well. They made the psak that everyone has to pay $100 towards their roof every year, and somebody that does not pay towards their roof, they or anyone in their family or their guests cannot carry.
And in Florida?
In Florida, yeah.
If he doesn't pay, whoever lives here. If he's a guest?
No, but again, it lives mean that you have a house here, you have a property.
Right. So if he's a guest?
If he's a guest, no.
No tourists. The tourists should not pay.
It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Meshum Rabbi Meir. Says Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Meir. Bnei Ha'ir. Okay, so it says like this. Bnei Ha'ir shalchu le'ir acheret. Asku me'alen tzedakah. Notzrin. U'shehen ba'in. U'mevin ota imahen. U'farnesin ba'aniyei iran. So now what they do is like this. Here, it's something very interesting. Here, they're obligating you to put money for tzedakah. So let's say right now, Miami does a fundraising. It's everybody in Miami are obligated to give $100 to tzedakah. So everybody gives. But now you're a tourist and you live the majority of the year in Shanghai. Yeah, so what happens? So you also have to give 100, but you don't give it here. You give 100, and when you go back to Shanghai, you have to give it over there. Yeah, that's what we just read. Why? Because you have to give to the anim of your city. Right? And this, by the way, is why it's so important to donate to the causes within the place. You don't know how many times I have people come. They say, Rabbi, we have to come. We're going to build the synagogue in Israel. I said, we also have to build the synagogue. No, but it's Eretz Yisrael. I said, okay, that's always. Doesn't matter where you live in the world. They always come before anything else, right?
So where is Kansas?
Are going to go over there, exactly. So that means basically what happens is here comes first. There's a big Yetzer Hara that a lot of people, they support outside. The reason why they support outside is because here, since it's an obligation, you don't get as much pats on the back because you're obligated to do it. So therefore, people prefer to give outside because then they make them feel like $1 million. So I'm going to come and somebody comes from the outside, from Israel, and I give him $1,000. He's going to say, and he's going to give me blessings galore. That was all for kavod. Why? Here they give $1,000 and they get a thank you. Well, that's it. They don't make them feel like $1 million. So what happens is because of that, right? Because of their own kavod, they prefer to give the money outside. But the real money that they're supposed to give is inside.
But I think
the exact same thing happens.
It's not that, Rabbi. I don't think that.
Yeah, so he says now like this. Right? Bnei Yir, that they come to they're asked for tzedakah, they have to give the tzedakah. But then when they're going back to their cities, right, it says, so he says, but if it's going to be a yachid, right, that means if it's going to be the people of the city, so then they have to go back to it. But if it's a yachid, right, he can't take it back to the city. He leaves it there. That means if you're an individual, you leave it there. If you're a group, then you could take it back to your city. But if you're an individual, you leave it in that city. That's it. Okay? Rav Huna Gazar Ta'anita, right? Rav Huna once came and he made a gzera of a ta'anit on the tzibur. Al legaber Rav Chana bar Chanilai v'chol bnei Mata. So Rav Chana bar Chanilai and all the people of the city went to him. V'ramu alayhu, and they put on him to give tzedakah. Yavu, and he gave it. Okay? Kibao lemeite. So when he wanted to go back, Amrulei, they told him, Notvalan more, right? He says, give us a tzedakah. He goes, give it to me and we want to go back. Amarlo, he says, Tanina bemet v'nimunim b'she'en sham chever ir. Kavzayin ubet, 27b. When is that? When there's no Tamid Chacham, which is mitasek v'tzorchet tzibur. Aval yesh sham chever ir, tinaten lechever ir. You have to give it to the rabbi and he's mechalek it. Especially because I actually are in charge of both anim, of my city and your city as well. So therefore, basically, once there's a cheverid, that's it. He's in charge. You give it to him. Vegamarnu. Says the Mishnah.
Basically, the work of a gabbai.
You're not allowed to sell a bet knesset of rabbim to a yachid. So you're going to bring it down from the kiddusha. These are the words that are being. Amrulo, if so, so you can't sell it from a big city to a small city. Also the same thing, which means because you're lowering the kiddusha. That means beforehand it belonged to the public. Now it only belongs to an individual. An individual doesn't have the same kiddusha. So because of that, that's why it's always much better always to get a rabim. Right? So not only is the kviyut, also the rabim and a yachid. Okay? Also very important.
You know, Rabbi, that's been the...
One second. Says the Gemara, Shapir Kamni le Rabbanah Rabim. 1 second. The rabbis were right. What's the difference between selling it from a rabim to yachid or from an igdola to iktana? But according to Rabim, igdola li iktana, mi kara kadisha sham. No, it says from one city to another city. At the end of the day, it still belongs to the rabim. So since it belongs to rabim, even though it's a bigger rabim, but it's a rabim, so it still has the same kiddusha. But from a rabim to yachid, leka kiddusha anymore. Once from a rabim to yachid, it does not have the same kiddusha. And therefore, once it doesn't have the kiddusha, because the yachid, right, is of an individual. So therefore, it's not the same thing anymore. But according to the rabbis, he says, no, you want more people, you want the multitudes, you want a lot of people blessing the Baruch Hu. Therefore, even from an Yigudola to Iktana, no, because you want a lot of people there. So Yigudola, you have a lot of people. Iktana, you have much less. So because of that, you don't want it. Now, you're only going to sell even a bet knesset of rabim. You're going to sell it al tnai. That if they want, they could always return it. Meaning, if you're already going to sell a bet knesset, make sure you sell on condition that whenever you want, you buy it back. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. You sell it forever, except for 4 dvarim. Right? Lemerchatz for a bathhouse, bursaki, which is a tannery. Okay, it has a bad smell. Okay, letvila, which is basically a place of tameh, which is like a mikveh, or betamayim, and a place of like a laundry. Right? So he says, Rabbi Yehuda says, says, no, you know what you do? You sell it like a chatzer, and then the buyer does whatever he wants. So even these 4 things. Right? No, you sell it as a courtyard, right? And you sell it as l'shem chatzer. And whatever he wants, he does whatever he wants with it. You don't sell it as a synagogue, you sell it as a chatzer. So says the Gemara, according to Rabbi Meir, how are they going to live in it? It was a tefillah. Right? He says, 1 second, if you're going to do this, how are you going to come and purchase it? This is rebit. Why? Because basically what's going to happen? I come, right? Let's say we're going to come, we're going to sell. We sell it. We sold it on condition. What's the condition? Whenever we want, we buy it back. When we're going to buy back, it's going to be interest. Because what's going to happen is we're going to give you back the money, right? And then what happens is it becomes interest. It's asur. So Rabbi Yochanan says, he says if one side is only going to be beribit, which means that the rebit, which is not coming through a loan and it's coming through a sale, okay, that's going to be permitted. That's how he holds. The Tanya was learned to the right. Imagine right now you lent your friend money, and right now you went and you sold your field. If the seller is eating the fruits, mutar, there's going to be no problem of rebit. But if the purchaser is going to eat the fruits, it's going to be a sur. Why? Because if he's going to pay back now the loan, it comes out that now he gets the loan plus fruits. So that's rebit. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Even if the purchaser is going to get the fruits, mutar, it's still going to be mutar. Rabbi Yehuda says, they said, you could bring a fruit from over there. No, it was the opposite. The seller was eating the fruits and not the lokeach. Again, one more time, the concept is that if I'm right now selling the field and it's the purchaser is getting it, so now when he pays the money, it comes out that he's getting the money plus fruits. So therefore he's getting rebit, he's getting extra, he's getting interest. Because now he's not only getting the value, he's also getting the fruits. So my benai, what's the difference between them? One side of rebit, that is the difference between them. Right? More savar, Rabbi Yehuda holds, which means that if you only have one side in the rebit, which means that if the chov is at the end of the day going to be paid off, and then it comes out that the perot, which you ate, is going to be rebit, but but there's a tzad that's not going to be rebit. So what happens is he's going to pay back everything at the end. So then it comes out that what happens is that there's no rebit. Umor savar tzadech rebit asur. Rava comes and says the chuli alma tzadech rebit. Yes, tzadech rebit is going to be asur. The difference is rebit on the condition to give it back. which means that if you're going to give it back or not, is that considered to be bitter? More savar bitter than lasir mutar, more savar asu, which means here at the end of the day, if you're going to give it back, so maybe there's not a bit because you gave everything back. But according to the Madamar, even if you're going to give it back, it's still a sur at the time. Says the two dots. You sell it for whatever it is, but you sell it forever. It's not a sale just for condition to get it back. Do you know a person is allowed to urinate within 4 amot of the tefillah? Okay, which means after it already passed the time of the tefillah, right? He's allowed to come and to urinate. Okay, but this is urinate, not to make number 2. Remember, in the olden days, right? They didn't have washrooms in places. Right? The washrooms were in the fields, were all over the place. So that's why. So he says over here, Amar Rabbi Yosef says, "Mike, well, we learned this. Basically, you sell it as a chaser, and whatever the purchaser does whatever he wants. Even the rabbis low kamre didn't say ela bebeta knesset the kiddusha by beta knesset, which is kavua as kiddusha, but arba'amot of tefillah, which is not kavua kiddusha. No, there's no problem. Which means the fact that I pray over here, right, it doesn't make it into a holy place. The fact that it's kavua, in order, that's what we already learned with the Rechovah Shalir. Remember, we learned it last night. In order to make something kadosh, you need kavua kiddushateh. If I'm going to come, let's say, for example, right, every single person during the virus, they were praying at home. So why they can't sell their house? Because their house has a kiddusha, right? Everything's temporary. Temporary means that as long as it's not kavua kiddushateh, it's not a fixed place. As a synagogue, right? That's temporary. Okay, it has to be 24/7 a synagogue.
You have some synagogue.
If it's every single Shabbat, and it's all the tefillot of Shabbat, and it's open every single Shabbat of the year, yes.
Look, for example,
if it's not going to be kivua kiddushateh, there's no kiddusha. Which means, let's say it's only for Friday nights, or this Friday night, no. The other Friday night, yes. Yeah, that's fine. If it's kavua, if that's kavua, that they only have it for Shabbat. Yeah, that's what they have. But if not, no. Okay? So, they said they taught in the academy of Rav Nachman. Somebody is going to pray, right? He comes and he says he has to distance himself 4 amot, and then he's going to be mashtin. So Amalei comes and he says, "Ma? Bishlema, right? Amashtin marchik 400 u'mitpalel. Tanya, we already learned it. Kama yarchik mehem. How much do you have to distance yourself from them? Mina Torah 400. You always have to distance yourself 4 amot, and then you read Kriyat Shema. Ela mitpalel marchik 400 mashtin. But the one that's praying, he's going to distance himself 4 amot, and he's going to do urinate. Lamali, what do we need it? Tihachi. So you're going to sanctify every single shvil in narda, because everybody's going to pray somewhere, right, on the path or whatever it is, and now everything is going to become holy. So obviously, because if it wasn't kavua kiddushatah, there's no problem. So when a person is going to urinate, he has to wait 4 amot in order that there's no drops at the end of the urine that's going to go on his feet, and it's going to be a problem. Why does a person have to wait 4 amot and then start praying after you already prayed? A person is always praying, and if he's not going to wait, what's going to happen is he's going to be mashtin tokede tefillah. That means the person is always, so without realizing it, he could start being mashtin, and he's saying tefillah, so he stops. So wait, and then he starts. Okay? Zalfan is a siman. Shalu talmidav et Rabbi Zakai. So the students asked Rabbi Zakai, "B'ma arachta yamim?" There's a very interesting gemara, right? This is a very interesting gemara because whenever you see an old person, you're supposed to ask them, "Why are you old?" Yeah, b'ma arachta yamim. Amar lehem yamai lo ishtanti mai mitoch 4 amot shel tefillah. I never did necessities within, right, the 4 amot of a tefillah. Okay, velo kineti shem lechaveri. I never put a nickname on my friend. Velo bitalti kiddush hayom. I never didn't do the kiddush on Shabbat. Okay, that means I always made sure that I did kiddush yain, even if he was poor, whatever it is. Okay.
You're talking about the kiddush club, wherever.
No, not about kiddush club. Yeah. Then he says ima zekena itali, and also he had an older mother who pamachat machra kipa sheberosha. Do you know that she actually sold her handkerchief on her head in order to bring me wine for Kiddush Hayom, just to show you how much it was. So Tana, they said, Kishemeta, when she passed away, Nichalo, right? She left for him, Shloshmel Garbe Yain, right? She left over for him 300 barrels of wine. So imagine how rich she became afterwards. So she left for him 300, and he left for his children 3,000. Right? This is because he was always makpid on wine for kiddush. Next, Ravuna az ava asar reicha rita veka kamed rav. So Ravuna was a chiger motna bechelev. It's a chiger motna bechevel, right? And he used to go in front of Rav. So he used to put on like a type of a belt, okay, and go in front of Rav. Amale, he told him, "Mayha, what is this?" Amale, he told him, "Lo avele kiddush. I didn't have kiddush. So I went and I took my avnet, my belt, and I took it like with the money of halva. And I got kiddush for yain. I got yain for kiddush." So Amale, he says, it should be your will that you should be covered with full of me'ilim, with full of how do you call me'ilim? Like jackets. Ki kalala rabba bere, right? When his son went into the wedding, Ravuna inish gutzava. He was very, very short. Gana puria. Right, he was sitting on the bed, and what happened was Atyam ben Ativ, all the daughters and the kalot, they all came, and what happened? Yeah, he says over here. Yeah, they threw their jackets on top of him. Yeah, until he became. So what happened was they all came. They started throwing on him a whole bunch of jackets and everything. Shamar Rav vikpad. So Rav heard, and he was very makpid. Do you know why? Amarli, he went and he said, which means like this: when you give a bracha to somebody, always say v'chen lemor. What is the chen lemor? Same to you, because you never know if it's going to get accepted. The bracha, so the bracha is going to get accepted. So then say it. You understand? So that's what happened. He said, say it. Shalut amidav. So very important. Yeah, whenever somebody gives you a blessing, chen lemor. Huh? Yes. Shalut amidav Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. B'ma dachte yamin. So they asked Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, "Hey, what did you have? A long life." I never made the Bet Knesset into a shortcut. I never stepped over the Talmidim, right, in order to go to my seat. And I didn't do Nesiyat Kapayim without a bracha. Shalut amidav et Rabbi Pereda. Right, b'ma dachte yamin. This is the whole question.
Wait, you have to go over the
No. Two different things. First of all, he didn't go in on top of other people in order to go to his seat because it looked like he was pushing people. So if he came late or whatever it is, he didn't go through people to go to his seat. He sat somewhere else in order not to bother them. The last one was Lona said he didn't do Nesiyat Kapayim without a bracha. It says here there's a bracha for Nesiyat Kapayim, but the bracha is it's an obligation. So what's the kavanah? So he says that even though it's an obligation, right? He says any Kohen that does it, he gets long life. However, though the Biur Gra says that's what he's saying. He's saying that even though it's an obligation, if he didn't do it, it's still bika kohanim. But he says still, if you do it, you get a beracha, right? They get long life. So he comes here and he says that miikar adin, right? There's no obligation to say the beracha. That even if you didn't say the beracha, it's okay.
Which means they used to do it without a bracha.
No. If they did do it without a bracha, it's okay. It's not that they used to do it without a bracha, but if you did it without a bracha, it's okay. But he says, but if you do it with a bracha, that's why he got long life. Okay, he was obviously a Kohen. Right now, it says over here, they asked Rabbi Pereda, why did he have long life? He says, nobody ever came to the Bet HaMikdash before me. And I never made a bracha in front of a Kohen bikat mazon. I never ate from an animal that they didn't give the matanot kiuna to the Kohen. It's like you're eating something which is not tight. But the halacha is not like him, which means that technically you're allowed to. And that's why he said it, but he was machmir. So since he was machmir, that's why he had a long life. So basically, this Gemara is talking about all the different things of long life because we want to copy it, to emulate it, in order that we should, Bezrat Hashem, also have long life.